Thanks, Igor, for inviting me to present on this topic. It's a topic I care about a lot, and I also have had the opportunity to participate in the Volunteer Experience Faculty Fellows Program this year. So this topic really dovetails nicely with the topics and issues that we talk about in that group. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that program in another slide. General agenda for this session. First, I'll talk about the frameworks and influences that I see directly impacting my approaches to well-being for students. I'll do a little bit about the PERMA model, which is UT's framework for thinking about student well-being and faculty well-being as well. I'll share some examples of some of the practices that I've tried so far, and then hopefully we can have a few minutes for discussion and questions after that. So as far as the influences upon my work, I always like to acknowledge sort of like what is the lineage of my thinking. I was a philosophy major in undergraduate, and I try to carry philosophy and theoretical work throughout everything I do. And back then, I was focused on post-colonial feminist theory and decolonizing theories. Those were my areas of interest in my undergrad. And so I still hold on to the influence of critical theories, especially critical feminist and Black feminist theory. I also have leaned heavily on democratic education principles. And then recently, I've started incorporating more and more contemplative practices into my higher ed practices. So I have several specific names listed for each of those bubbles. And some of these folks overlap and intersect in terms of the influences. So like bell hooks would be considered a democratic education proponent as well as a critical theorist. And I would say she also leans heavily into spiritual and contemplative practices as well. So some of these placements are not reflecting the intersectionality of the influence. But these are some of the folks that I was thinking of when I thought about well-being approaches in particular. At UT, we are now using something called PERMA. And can you all indicate, has anybody heard of this framework already? I don't know how well known it is so far. If you could just gesture thumbs up if you've heard of the PERMA framework. Sounds like Grace. Oh, hi, Grace. Okay, not too many. So the PERMA framework came about from a set of work that the provost initiated and had a faculty group meet to really think about what would support student success and academic learning at UT and how we could improve our practices. And so the PERMA framework came out of that. And this is an evidence-based framework that was developed at University of Pennsylvania, I believe. And the acronym has 5 letters, and each of the letters stands for a component of the framework. So the P is for positive emotion, and that is very general positive psychology. Students need to have positive emotional experiences in order to be successful and feel successful. The E stands for engagement. And of course, engagement is something we're all concerned about when we're teaching online because it feels quite different from in-person engagement. And I think everyone I've talked to who is trying to teach well online or hybrid is always thinking of how to engage students more. The R stands for relationships. And I think that especially in my field of family studies, we know relationships are the foundation for all well-being. We are human beings who have evolved to live in community and depend on each other and be interdependent. And so we need to bring that into our teaching practices as well. The M, I really love the M. It stands for meaning. And this is really fun to play with in instructional practices, because this is where we help students see that what we're asking them to do is connected to a meaningful purpose. And in my field, I've been working a lot with people who want to work with families and children. And then recently, I've mostly worked with people who want to be teachers of young children. And so it's a professional preparation track, it's a licensure track, and it's usually really easy for me to connect the dots for students of like, we need to learn this content and practice these skills, because in a year or two, you're going to be a teacher with your own classroom and you need to be able to put these things into practice. And my job is to help them see, to bridge that difference between what they think of as just homework and busy work to how it's going to translate into a professional skill that they need to use pretty proficiently. And then A stands for accomplishments. And this is just where all of us need to feel a sense of achievement. We need to feel like we can do the work. And I ask my students all the time, like, if you were failing at all your assignments and all your tests, would you stay in that major? Would you stay in that program? And they said, no, you wouldn't want to do that. You need to feel like you're accomplishing something. So those are the letters of the PERMA framework. And these are the volunteer experience faculty fellows for this academic year. So we applied in the spring, and I assume they'll continue the program and they'll put out a call for applications next spring. And you commit to do a little bit of work, just a tiny amount of homework in the summer. And then you agree to meet in the fall and spring semesters. And in the spring semester, it's focused on dissemination. So like, for instance, me doing this brown bag session counts as one of my commitments to share out the work. And so we meet, and it's a great opportunity to talk to other instructors from all across campus. So we've got folks from engineering, foreign language. I'm in teacher education. We've got counselor education, nursing, business school. There are people from so many different branches of campus. It's really nice to sit around with colleagues that we don't normally talk to and just talk about dilemmas for practice, or talk about like what they're doing to apply the PERMA framework in their classrooms. And one of the key messages in the fellowship so far has been that a lot of us are doing a lot of these elements already as instructors. We might not be calling it PERMA, but we're all doing a little bit of PERMA somewhere in the mix. And so we do spend some time just sharing what we're already using that's effective, and then we collaborate on new ideas. So I highly recommend, if you're interested in well-being and student well-being, that you think about doing the Faculty Fellows program. And you do get a stipend, so you do get a benefit of a stipend to help offset the additional work and time that you put into it. In the PERMA content, we make a distinction between wellness and well-being. So wellness would apply to kind of more of a health model, like the absence of illness. So primarily physical wellness. And when we talk about well-being for students in our PERMA framework, we're thinking of a more comprehensive picture. So way beyond physical wellness, we're talking about social wellness, mental health, your basic functional life, like skills and well-being. Is everything going okay with your relationships and your housing and so forth? Because all of those things can either support or challenge students who are trying to be with us and get through their programs and learn. And so one of my first questions for today to ask you all to engage with is if you can think about your own well-being and picture yourself being in a state of complete well-being. So picture that might mean you're sitting somewhere else and doing different things right now, but picture what well-being looks like and feels like for you personally. And when you think about what that would feel like or what you'd be doing, what it would feel like in your body, or some things you'd feel like you had a handle on, put in the chat just some words or a word that you would use to describe that state of well-being for yourself. Leanne says peaceful. Grace also says peace and balance. Courtney says present and centered and not flustered. That would be nice. Oh, hi, Andrea. Connection. Andrea is pointing out having someone to connect with for comfort and support. Anne says calm. Gregory says equilibrium. It's a nice word. Melissa says security and safety in all areas of life. Tracy mentions relaxed. Revital mentions centered. Yes, I would agree with all of those. I was thinking of my example, one of my words would be rested. Right now, I'm not very rested at this point in the semester. I'm working long days and it's crunch time. And I think for well-being more and more, I find that I need to be well rested to feel well. And so if I were in class talking about well-being, sometimes I will ask students to describe it in words, but if we're online, I might ask them to go find an image of a place or an image of like a meme image that represents well-being to them. And then we would have a slide deck where each person adds in an image of their like ideal sense of well-being. And it's a really fun way to get to know the students and to also acknowledge that we all might have a little bit different definition and different priorities for well-being. So that's a hint at an activity for engagement that you might consider doing to just start off getting everyone on common ground with talking about well-being. And I am very transparent with my students. I tell them that I am using the PERMA framework. I explain to them that I'm learning and working on it, and I welcome their feedback and input. And at the end of the slideshow, I have some excerpts from the students' voices themselves for what they think is helpful to them for well-being. So I'll share those with you at the end. So in the PERMA model, I won't go through all the letters today, and I just chose to focus on the R for relationships because that is usually one of my top priorities with students. And the tenets of relationships in the PERMA framework are, number one, sense of belonging. And of course, this is important for learning. But it's also one of the core psychological needs that we have as humans, and that cuts across cultures. So as we look at comparative psychology, sense of belonging is a core need for all humans, no matter if you live in an individualist culture, a collectivist culture. It is one of the core human needs. And so that is built obviously through relationship and your sense that you're being included as an important member of the community. And relationships also can involve a pedagogy of caring. And I so smile when I say that because I always anticipate that folks might be a little jaded about hearing like, oh, we have to use a pedagogy of caring. But But it really is, relationships are supportive if they are caring relationships. And what that might look like in our professional practice might be a little bit different than how it looks in our personal lives, but we can absolutely find ways to incorporate a pedagogy of caring. And in fact, Digital Learning just had a wonderful book club on the book Pedagogy of Kindness, and we had great conversations in that book club. It was really nice to connect with other faculty who are talking about kindness, and how we structure that into our work. So I want to go a little bit deeper into what I think building sense of belonging and pedagogy of caring look like. And for me, I extend the idea that relationships are central into concept of building community, specifically building beloved community. So throughout my experiences with adult education, coaching, teaching, mentoring, and leadership development work, I've really come to lean on this concept of building beloved community as a very intentional practice. It is a practice that's tied up in the ethics and politics of feminist critical theory. The goal, the agenda is liberation. It's not just to help people meet metrics that maybe the institution needs or that the program needs for students, but what I'm aiming for is learning that's situated in liberated experience so that students and faculty, everyone involved in the community, are able to be who they are and do the work that they find important. Um, Bell Hooks writes a lot about this approach. Two of her books in particular focus a lot on these practices, All About Love and then Teaching to Transgress. These are books that I've read many, many times. They're very dense, even though they're short books. But she's very explicit about using love as this very instrumental, functional, and ideological construct. And in this quote, she talks about not devaluing and degrading the meaning of love. And in my work, I can really see, like when she says in this quote, when we are loving, we are openly and honestly expressing care. We're expressing affection, responsibility, respect, and commitment, and trust. And to clarify, when I talk about building beloved community, I'm just talking about building a space where everyone can be exactly who they are and work to be whoever they're trying to be. The care and affection are paired with accountability and responsibility. So this isn't about treating students as if they are like children or treating them as if they are being coddled or, like loving on them, but not holding high expectations. It's about holding high expectations and high rigor, but with accountability and support, along with high expectations. Further and deeper into this practice, I consider belonging to be something much more than inclusivity. So when I think of inclusivity, I think of, okay, this university is a place and my class is a place where you're included. Like, welcome to this room. Here are the rules of this room. And in order to function in this room, you kind of oftentimes have to kind of get with the program. And that's how a lot of systems and spaces are built. But for me, belonging really is about mutuality. And Cole Arthur Riley is one of my favorite folks these days. For anyone who's needing any kind of balm for the days and what the world is presenting with us right now, I highly recommend her book, This Here Flesh, or her more recent book, Black Liturgies. She calls belonging mutuality, and she says that we, in this way, we don't just welcome you or accept you, but we need you. We're insufficient without you, and one part's absence renders the whole impoverished in some way, even if the whole didn't previously apprehend it. In mutuality, belonging is both a gift received and a gift given. There's comfort in being welcomed, but there's dignity in knowing that your arrival just shifted a whole group toward deeper wholeness. Yes, Leanne, this is very powerful. This is where I could maybe do a whole other workshop, but I'm going to put a boundary on how much I talk about it, about who does the university belong to? Who do our courses belong to? When we say that students belong, what I also mean is the course belongs to them. It's not that they get to belong because we let them in the door. Belonging, we wouldn't have the courses if it weren't for the students. I think the university is the property of the people. It's the property of the state of Tennessee. And that means all the people, right? So we must shape our community fundamentally by who is present, not like this is my place and I gatekeep who gets to be whole here, who gets to be successful here. Thank you, Courtney. So just to be clear, I want to be clear about my my politics and my agenda when I talk about belonging and well-being. So this is something that I'm constantly working on, while I'm also acknowledging that many things I do are actually perpetuating systems and ways that students don't feel a sense of belonging. So I'm also willing to own and acknowledge that I'm not there yet, but I'm going to keep working on that. And that's my goal. So now I'll get into some specific practices, but before I do that, I would like to ask another question. If you all will be willing to put into the chat, when you think of sense of belonging for yourself, if you can think of a place or a time or a work situation or even a community or home situation, when you knew you had a strong sense of belonging, what are words that describe what it feels like when you know sense of belonging is there for you? And these are all wonderful, wonderful words. I like that safe came up first because neuroscience also teaches us that we have to feel a sense of safety in order to access the higher functions of our brain. Our students cannot learn if they don't feel safe. Feeling valued and comfortable, feeling respected, being authentic, having security again, safety, feeling respected. It's peaceful, right? It's not contentious when we know we belong. It can still be hard, right? We can still do hard work and solve hard problems within that context. We might have more confidence, yeah. Being safe, known, and welcome. Being seen is really important, right? So belonging is more than just inclusion, because if you're in the room, we might be ignoring you and ignoring your needs. But belonging really means being seen. Being content, a no judgment zone. Judgment is a really important concept when we talk about this work. And yes, authentic. It is a lot. There's a lot tied up with this, but thank you all I agree with all of those words there. I resonate with those personally too. I've definitely worked in spaces that felt like I had a sense of belonging, and I definitely have worked in spaces where I didn't. And then some of the spaces that I'm in at the university, I am always shifting between moment to moment, feeling a sense of belonging and feeling a sense of not belonging. It can be really complicated. I'm sure that other people can relate to that feeling. So getting down to practices that focus on relationship and belonging. One of the first things I ask students to do in my courses is to take a selfie. And this selfie is a self-description of you as a learner. When I teach in person, I print this out on paper and I have them fill it out by hand because I think, it's good to switch up modalities. Sometimes if I'm doing this digitally, I'll show them this image. And sometimes I have a graphic image that they can kind of like edit and write on. But if I have a lot of people online, I'll create a Google form with the questions and they fill this out. So I'm asking them to tell me about their preferred learning modes. Instead of asking them things they like and don't like in classes, I ask them the top right question, that they'd like to see more of what things in their courses and what would they like to see less of in their courses. I give them a chance on the bottom left to describe to me their strengths as a learner, what they believe their strengths are. And then on the right, of course, it's always good to ask students what are their own goals for the course and for their learning. And so I'll collect those. And like I said, if it's a small group, I might have 15 or 20 of these documents. But if it's a larger group, it'll look more like a Google spreadsheet form. And here's where I'd like to talk about equity practices a little bit, because, we might think like, well, how can I really engage with all of that content if I have like a lot of students, 50 students, 100 students? Well, first tip that I would suggest, one of our colleagues mentions that she does this in larger sections of classes, is that she uses AI to generate like a thematic analysis. And so you could put this into AI and say, generate themes for me based off of this. But I would also save that file and say that some of your students are going to sail through your class. Some of your students are going to do well if you are not accommodating their learning style whatsoever, right? And you might even have half or the majority of your students who are going to sail through your course. It's really for the students who might be struggling that you might want to come back around. Like, let's say they've gotten several assignments in that are pretty weak, or they're, struggling just to be at class or engage or participate. Going back to those students' information in the selfie would be useful. And so I hold on to them. And when I notice somebody slipping, I can kind of go revisit this. And then I know, may ask them to meet with me or touch base with me, or even do like a digital check-in where I ask them some questions. But because they already told me some things on this form at the beginning of the course, I can kind of come in with a little bit more sense, like that I know you a little bit already. I'm not just treating you as like random student, 334. So the selfies have been really helpful. I also use these in professional setting when I'm training teachers and when I'm in coaching relationships with teachers, and it works really well for them in the coaching context to obviously ask them like, what's working for you, what's not working for you in this coaching situation, and what are your personal goals. Another practice, so I have a set of practices that I would put under the umbrella of mindfulness practices. And one tool that I use consistently in every course that I teach, and we use it every course session, is something that comes from emotional intelligence curriculum. And this is our check-in routine for the beginning of class. And this comes from curriculum from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. They have a system called Ruler. They have a framework that they've developed all through evidence-based practices, and they've rolled this out for organizations and for schools in particular. This particular little tool is called the Mood Meter. And it's funny, we've been using this for a really long time, but when Inside Out, the movie, came out, these colors sort of have relations to the characters in that movie. So it's really funny how a lot more people at least identify with how emotion language can be connected to different colors. But the mood meter chart is a way for students. So this is on Padlet. I used to do it on Google Jamboard, but if any of you used to use Google Jamboard, it's like retiring. So sad day. But now I do this on Padlet. And at the beginning of class, they go to the link and they go to the little marker tool and they mark where they're sitting on the mood meter. So this is a mindful practice because it brings them to present awareness of their state. So non-judgmental awareness of it just is what it is. This is where I am right now today. It's important as a facilitator in mindfulness work and this emotional intelligence work that I'm non-judgmental. So no matter where they are on this mood meter, like I am in acceptance of that, right? You're coming into class hot. You just found out you failed your exam from another class, or you've had a really tense interaction with someone else, on faculty. Naturally, you're going to be agitated when you come into this class. This is just an exercise to help them be aware of their present state. Sometimes with my teacher preparation classes, we move into some deeper curriculum with this, and we start working on questions like, okay, let's say you're feeling exhausted or you're feeling stressed, but you're about to run a whole day for second graders. Where would you rather be on this mood meter? What's the distance between point A and point B? And what strategies would you like to, learn how to use to get from stressed over to a mood state that might be more productive and conducive to your job today, right? Your role with children and being like present with the children, so that you're not taking it out on them or, missing the mark all day long. So we have deeper conversations about regulation and mood states and co-regulation with children. But at least in class, most of the time, this is just like a 2-minute activity where we check in. And then over the semester, it helps me get a sense, like it's interesting how early in the semester, we'll have a lot more yellow and green and sometimes some red for stress. But in the middle of the semester, we get a lot more blue where students start to get really tired and worn down. It gives me a sense to how to read the room and bring empathy into, the room. I don't call students out and ask them to share exactly what their answer is or why. I mean, they can choose to tell us if they want to. So I don't use it as like, well, who's sitting over there in the stressed box? Why are you stressed? Because that could possibly feel invalidating. But we just kind of let it be. And I also train them on how to be empathetic members of the community. So if they know that their peers like could be feeling really stressed or upset or grieving or whatever, that they can bring some kindness to their peers as well. We also do some practices for cultivating small bits of joy. It's another thing that we all need a little bit more of, I think, these days in particular. And I call this exercise good things keep happening. So no matter how stressed we are, no matter how difficult it might feel for us to be doing, meeting all the demands that we have, there's always something we can find from the past week that we would call like a good thing. So this is cultivating joy, and you could also maybe interpret this as cultivating gratitude, although it's not primarily designed as a gratitude exercise. It's just like a moment to say like, what's something good that happened. And so I'll have a link to, this is just a Google Doc. I use really simple tools where they put their name and they elect to tell us something that, something great that happened. Like these are some samples of things students have said, I got a new puppy. I get paid this Friday. I got a new water bottle. I found a new TV show that I want to binge. I met up with my childhood friends, or I got to see my family last weekend. I try to make sure to also to address issues like social perception of like, I tell them this is not a place to just brag about like grandiose things like you went to the Bahamas. Like, no, I want to know the little things that happened. Like you got a new water bottle. You're really excited about that. Like those are like great things to add onto the list. And it's great to celebrate small joys. Another thing I do with relationship building is I share some power in the classroom. And so this practice is about building in choice and responsivity to my teaching. And of course, there's like 100 ways we can build choice into classes. This is just one. I'll do a Mentimeter, a menti.com survey at the beginning of class. And I'll have a menu on there of like possible things that we go over today that are on my agenda, but I let them vote for which things they need help with the most or what they want to hear about the most that day. And then I use the results of the survey to shuffle my agenda. And so, some people say they use a liquid syllabus, but I consider this to be a liquid agenda where I start the class. I'm ready to talk about 2 or 3 things. And of course, all my materials are in Canvas and, I've got all the resources. But I just pivot that day if they need more help with something or another. And in this class, the example is we're going over some approaches for handling behaviors in the classroom. They're learning how to write lesson plans, but I let them decide what's going to be the feature topic of the day. And this day they wanted to discuss specific behavior scenarios that they see going on in classrooms because my students are out in field work while they're also concurrently in courses with me. So they have lots of stories about what they're seeing and they have lots of questions about how to interpret things or how to handle, situations that come up. So, I also have other places where they can choose assignment options. And that also helps me get to know them as learners a little bit better. And it gives them a sense of, I think it gives them a sense of belonging because they have a say-so, right? Like they know that the classroom is built for them. The course is built for them. The content is built for them in particular, and they're not last year's students or students from 3 years ago or students next year, but this particular group gets what they need. Another practice for relationship building is building in connection. So in either my hybrid or my fully online courses, I will build this schedule such that some weeks your virtual work is to have a check-in with me. And so this is just a picture of my schedule where on Tuesdays we are meeting in person to cover these topics, and these are the readings for those topics. And then on Thursdays, these are what they're supposed to do asynchronously. And so I have one-on-one Zoom check-ins, and that's just a link that I provide them and they go and sign up. I don't have to do anything. We don't email each other about this. They just all know that to go in and find a time that works for them. And in this class, I spread it out across 2 weeks. If I had a really large section, I might spread it out across even more weeks, just depending on my schedule. And if I had a really large section of students, I would do small group meetings, meet with 3 or 4 students at a time, and find some kind of logical way to break them into groups for that. And I just use a Google Calendar appointment setup that they can go to. I know we're not using Google in the future. Now I've got to transition to something else, but I haven't done that yet. But it's on my to-do list to learn how to use other systems. And finally, I just want to end with the students telling us what matters to them. These are my students talking to you all. They would like us to understand that they're all humans and things come up sometimes. And other students said, I agree with this, and me too. They said, we all have our own lives going on. So getting to know them, they mean students, would make them feel better and make them feel more known and encouraged. They want to build relationships so they feel seen, and it would help get rid of the fear of approaching professors when life happens. Get to know the students better on a more personal level. This would make me more comfortable in class and make me want to speak up more and answer questions. One student said, I love doing the mood meter and the check-ins in this class. So I think if other teachers did this, it would create a more welcoming environment. Another student said check-in weekly. That seems like a lot, but I don't know what, I want to follow up and see what they mean by weekly, but they just mean frequent check-ins and getting to know students more one-on-one. And allowing in-class discussions, encouraging communication with each other as a good way to learn and dive deeper into material. And I'll just finish with this Gallup report summary that found that when graduates felt supported by their professors in college, their odds of being engaged in work more than doubled, and their odds of thriving in their well-being did as well. This was true of graduates of all ages and years of graduation. In other words, it's career and life trajectory game changer for students to feel supported. So it has long-term outcomes and ripple effects because when we are teaching students what it feels like to be well and experience well-being, they're more likely going to know how to cultivate that in their communities wherever they go beyond the university, which would be a wonderful legacy for us to leave.